Imagine it's the year 260 AD. You're a Roman legionary stationed at the frontier in what is now Germany. You've served the empire for 15 years. You've bled for it. And today, you've just received your pay. You hold the silver denarius in your hand. It feels lighter than you remember. You bite it the way your father taught you. The metal is softer. The edges feel wrong. You've been paid in the same coin your entire career. But somehow, this one isn't the same. It has the same face, the same emperor, the same inscriptions. But it contains roughly half the silver it did when you enlisted. You haven't been told this. No announcement was made. No decree was issued explaining that your wages have been quietly cut. But your body knows. The bread seller at the market knows. The wine merchant knows. Everyone knows, even if no one says it out loud. The coin still works. It's still legal. It just buys less. Now fast forward 18 centuries. It's 2024. You're a retiree in Ohio. You've worked for 43 years. You saved diligently. You did everything the financial advisors told you to do. You put money in the bank, you contributed to your pension, and now you're watching your grocery bill increase by double digits each year. Your savings account pays 2% interest, while prices rise by 8, 10, 12% on the things you actually need. Your bank statement shows the same number it did 5 years ago. But somehow that number commands less. No one knocked on your door to announce that your retirement was being diluted. No decree was issued, but the bread seller knows, the pharmacy knows, your landlord knows, you're holding a lighter coin. And here's the thing no one will tell you. This isn't a malfunction. It's the design. This is documented history. What you're about to hear is not speculation. It's pattern recognition drawn from 5,000 years of monetary experiments. Every single one of them ended the same way. Every single one. There have been approximately 795 fiat currencies in recorded history. The average lifespan is 27 years. Not one has survived in its original form. Not the Roman denarius, not the French livre, not the German paper mark, not the Zimbabwean dollar, not the Venezuelan bolivar. And yet, somehow, we believe ours is different. The currency system you use today was not designed to preserve your wealth. It was designed to transfer it quietly, continuously, from those who save to those who spend, from those who work to those who borrow, from the future to the present. This isn't conspiracy, it's arithmetic. And once you understand the arithmetic, you'll understand why the system was never meant to last, why it couldn't be designed any other way, and why the failure won't be announced. It'll just happen, slowly, until one day you realize the coin in your hand is hollow. Let that sink in. Most people believe that inflation is a natural economic phenomenon, something that just happens, like weather, like seasons. They believe central banks exist to fight inflation, and sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, but the battle is real, and the intentions are good. This is the story we're told. Inflation is caused by supply chain disruptions, by greedy corporations, by unexpected shocks, by wars and pandemics. It's external, it's accidental, it's regrettable. Central bankers are portrayed as firefighters, rushing in to contain the blaze, adjusting interest rates, issuing statements, holding press conferences with furrowed brows and careful language. They're doing their best, we're told. It's a difficult job. And the currency? It's stable, backed by the full faith and credit of the government, as solid as the institutions that issue it. This narrative is almost entirely false, not because the people telling it are lying, but because the truth is structural. It's built into the machinery itself, and the machinery was designed by people who understood exactly what they were building. Here's what's actually happening. Currency debasement is not a bug. It's the primary feature. Every fiat currency system, meaning a currency backed by nothing but government decree, requires inflation to function. Not because inflation is desirable, but because the alternative is politically impossible. Let me explain the mechanism. When a government spends more than it collects in taxes, it has three options. 1, raise taxes. This is visible. It's unpopular. Politicians who raise taxes tend to lose elections. 2, cut spending. This is also visible. It's also unpopular. Someone's benefit gets reduced. Someone's program gets eliminated. Politicians who cut spending also tend to lose elections. 3, borrow money. This is nearly invisible. No one's taxes go up today. No one's benefits get cut today. The cost is pushed into the future, to someone else, to some other generation. And here's the key insight. When a government borrows money in a modern monetary system, that money is often created, not transferred from someone else's savings, created, conjured, added to the total supply. When you add to the supply of something, you dilute its value. This is true for stocks, it's true for commodities, and it's true for money. The result is inflation. But here's the dark elegance of this system. Inflation is an invisible tax. It requires no legislation, no vote, no announcement. It happens automatically, continuously. And it falls hardest on those who hold currency rather than assets, which means it falls hardest on workers, on savers, on the poor, on the elderly. The government can spend beyond its means. The central bank can accommodate that spending. and the cost is extracted from the purchasing power of everyone who holds the currency. This is not a breakdown. This is the system operating exactly as intended. Now let's go deeper into the mechanism that makes this inevitable. In the modern monetary system, nearly all money is created through debt. When a bank issues a loan, it doesn't lend out existing deposits. It creates new money. The loan itself becomes the deposit. This is called fractional reserve banking, though in practice, the reserves are so minimal that the term almost doesn't apply anymore. This means money and debt are two sides of the same coin. Literally, for money to exist, debt must exist. For the money supply to grow, the debt supply must grow. Think about what that means. If the debt supply ever stops growing, the money supply stops growing. Economic activity contracts. Asset prices fall. Unemployment rises. The system lurches toward depression. So there's a structural imperative built into the system. The debt must always grow, not just absolutely, but relative to the economy, because the interest on the debt must also be paid, which requires more money, which requires more debt. This is not sustainable, and everyone who designed this system knew it wasn't sustainable. But sustainability wasn't the goal. The goal was to create a system flexible enough to finance wars, welfare states, and political promises, a system that could expand credit rapidly during crises, a system that transferred the costs to the future. The designers weren't fools. They were engineers solving for a specific problem. How do you fund government ambitions without the constraints of hard money? The answer was, you create soft money, and you accept that soft money has a shelf life. This pattern is ancient. In Rome, the denarius was originally almost pure silver, 95% or higher. By the time of Marcus Aurelius in the 2nd century, it was down to 75%. By the crisis of the 3rd century, it was perhaps 5% silver. The rest was bronze. The Roman government faced expanding military costs, defending borders, paying legions, bribing enemies. The taxes couldn't keep up, so they debased the coin, slowly, invisibly. One emperor after another, shaving a little more silver, adding a little more base metal. Prices rose. Not because merchants were greedy, because the money was worth less. The same story repeated in medieval Europe. Kings would recall coins, melt them down, remint them with less precious metal, and spend the difference. This was called seigniorage. It was a royal privilege, and it was universally despised by the common people who watched their savings evaporate. The French livre lost 90% of its silver content between the reign of Charlemagne and the French Revolution. That's not a typo. 90%. Over 8 centuries of slow, quiet dilution. In Weimar Germany, the mechanism was faster. Between 1921 and 1923, the German mark went from 60 marks per dollar to 4.2 trillion marks per dollar. The government was printing money to pay war reparations and striking workers. By the end, workers were paid twice a day because prices were rising by the hour. In Zimbabwe, the same story. In Venezuela, the same story. In Argentina, which has defaulted on its debt 9 times, the same story. The details change. The mechanism does not. A government faces costs. It cannot pay through taxation. It borrows. It prints. The currency dilutes. Slowly at first, then faster, then all at once. This isn't theory. It's the most documented pattern in economic history. Now we ask the uncomfortable question, who benefits from this system? First, governments. Every government that has ever existed has faced the temptation to spend beyond its means. Currency debasement makes this possible, without the political cost of raising taxes. It's the ultimate political technology. Second, borrowers. If you owe money and the currency is debasing, your debt becomes easier to repay. The dollars you borrowed are worth more than the dollars you repay. The largest borrower in most economies is the government itself. This is not a coincidence. Third, asset holders. When new money is created, it doesn't flow equally to everyone. It flows first to banks, to financial institutions, to those with access to credit. These early receivers can purchase assets, real estate, stocks, commodities, before prices rise. By the time the new money reaches workers through wages, prices have already adjusted upward. This is called the Cantillon effect, named after an 18th century economist who first described it. The result is a wealth transfer, not through taxation, not through explicit policy, through the structure of the monetary system itself. Fourth, the financial industry. The more money that flows through the system, the more transactions occur, the more fees and interest payments are generated. A stable money supply would mean a smaller financial sector. A constantly expanding money supply means a constantly expanding financial sector. These are not accusations. These are observations about incentive structures. The people who benefit most from the current system are the people with the most power to influence the current system. This is why the system persists, despite its obvious flaws. The beneficiaries are concentrated. The costs are diffuse. Now we turn to the other side. The people who pay the price are almost always the same. Savers. Anyone who holds currency rather than assets watches their purchasing power erode. A dollar saved in 1971, the year the last link to gold was severed, buys about 12 cents worth of goods today. Saving money in a fiat system is a losing strategy. Workers. Wages are sticky. They adjust slowly, prices adjust quickly. In the period between a monetary expansion and wage adjustments, workers effectively take a pay cut every time. Retirees. Fixed incomes become unfixed by inflation. A pension that seemed adequate at retirement becomes inadequate 10 years later. This is not failure to plan. This is a system designed to erode fixed claims. The poor. Wealthy people hold assets. Poor people hold cash. And when cash loses value, poverty deepens. This is regressive taxation by another name. Developing nations. Many poorer countries hold their reserves in dollars or euros. When those currencies are debased, their reserves are debased. When they try to defend their own currencies, they're forced into austerity. When they try to print, they face hyperinflation. They're trapped in a system they didn't design and can't escape. These are the groups that bear the cost, and they bear it invisibly. No bill is sent, no vote is taken. The transfer happens through the silent arithmetic of purchasing power. Here's the question that matters most. Could this have been designed differently? In theory, yes. A currency backed by a commodity, gold, silver, a basket of goods, cannot be inflated at will. Governments would face hard constraints. They would have to tax or cut spending. They couldn't simply create money. This is exactly how most monetary systems worked for most of history. But here's the problem. Hard money imposes discipline, and discipline is politically painful. In 1933, Franklin Roosevelt confiscated private gold holdings in the United States. Why? Because the government needed to inflate, and it couldn't inflate while citizens could convert dollars to gold at a fixed rate. In 1971, Richard Nixon ended the convertibility of dollars to gold for foreign governments. Why? Because the United States had printed far more dollars than it had gold to back them. Foreign nations were cashing in. The system was about to break. Both decisions were made under pressure. Both were framed as temporary emergencies. Both became permanent. Once you understand the incentive structure, you understand why hard money always fails politically. Voters want benefits without taxes. Politicians want power without pain. The financial industry wants expansion without limits. The military wants budgets without constraint. The only system that satisfies all these demands is soft money. Money that can be created as needed, money that can be inflated quietly, money that transfers costs to the future and to the powerless. That's the trap. You cannot return to hard money without causing a depression. Debts would become unpayable, asset prices would collapse, unemployment would spike. No politician will voluntarily trigger this, and you cannot continue with soft money indefinitely. Eventually, the debt math becomes impossible. Interest payments consume the budget, confidence erodes, the currency becomes suspect. At this point, there are only three options. 1. Default on the debt. Explicit, painful, politically explosive. 2. Inflate away the debt. Implicit, quiet, politically manageable until it isn't. 3. Restructure through financial repression. Keep interest rates below inflation for decades. Let the currency slowly dissolve the debt. None of these options are painless. None of them preserve the value of savings. None of them are reversible. That's why the system was designed to fail quietly. Because failing loudly would mean admitting what was always true. The currency was never meant to last. This brings us to today. The United States national debt has exceeded $34 trillion. The interest payments on that debt now exceed military spending. They are the fastest growing line item in the federal budget. The Congressional Budget Office projects that within a decade, interest payments alone will consume more than 20% of all federal revenue. That's before Social Security, before Medicare, before defense, just interest. This is not sustainable. Everyone knows it isn't sustainable. But there's no political mechanism to change course. Raising taxes enough to close the gap is politically impossible. Cutting spending enough to close the gap is politically impossible. So the only remaining option is to continue borrowing, continue printing, continue diluting. The dollar has lost over 97% of its purchasing power since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. That's not an accident. That's the system functioning as designed. The question isn't whether this continues. Of course it continues. The incentives demand it. The question is what happens at the end. In some countries, the end is hyperinflation. In others, it's currency reform. A new currency replaces the old at some devastating exchange rate. In others, it's prolonged stagnation, where an entire generation watches their prosperity quietly drain away. None of these outcomes are certain, but some form of resolution is inevitable. The math doesn't allow for a soft landing. Too many promises have been made. Too few resources exist to fulfill them. Something has to give. This is historical and educational analysis, not financial or investment advice. What you do with this information is your own responsibility. Let me leave you with this. The Roman legionary in 260 AD never received an announcement explaining why his coin was hollow. He just noticed over time that his wages bought less, that the empire seemed somehow diminished, that promises made were quietly being broken. He likely blamed merchants, or foreigners, or the gods, because those were the explanations offered. The real explanation, that the system itself was designed to extract value from him without his knowledge, was never spoken aloud. 18 centuries later, the retiree in Ohio receives no announcement either. She just notices that her savings seem lighter, that the promises made by employers and politicians and financial advisors don't quite add up anymore, that something, somewhere, has been quietly broken. She might blame corporations, or politicians, or bad luck, because those are the explanations offered. But the pattern is the same, the mechanism is the same, the outcome will be the same. This channel exists to study the autopsies before they repeat. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, and the meter is always the same. Quiet at first, then louder, then all at once. The question isn't if, it's when. If this economic historian lens was useful, then subscribe and tap the bell icon for more videos so most people never see these patterns until it's too late.